So I already introduced myself. My name is Karina Homme. Do we have mics for everybody? Oh, you got it? We've got one missing, I think. Oh, there's only 3. We're going to have to learn to share tonight.
Womp womp.
Okay, great. So thank you for all the panelists for joining us tonight. I think I just wanted to start with maybe everyone giving a little intro of who you are and what you're doing in emerging tech today.
So as I already said, I'm the Regional Customer Success Director for UiPath. My background has always been in technology. I was a software developer, started out as a technologist developer, and then grew in software management, managed big teams across the globe, and then decided that I wanted to study at the ripe old age of 38. So I went to MIT and decided to study AI. Did that, and then I decided, okay, I have to look for a company that did emerging technology, and UiPath was the right fit in terms of what I wanted to do, and that's how I got into working in emerging tech.
Jeremy Walsh. I'm a chief technologist over at Booz Allen Hamilton. I spend a lot of my time working with mostly what I call our civil health agencies, so FDA, CDC, NIH, VA, even military health too sometimes, to basically implement advanced innovative technologies. I'm in our Booz Allen Strategic Innovation Group, which spends a lot, and especially within that group, within the analytics team. So my focus is big data, cloud systems, advanced analytics, machine learning, AI, really just basically trying to take sort of, I'd say, leading edge solutions and drive those and work with our government clients and drive those to sort of, production style systems. So that's where I spend a lot of my time.
I'm Dominic Sale. Can I bring it? Does that work? All right. I am. I know I was promoted as an emerging tech expert. I guarantee you, I'm the least technical here on this panel. I'm really a government bureaucrat who's trying to make technology work better for the American people. So, I work for the Technology Transformation Services. I have somewhat of a technical background, but mostly I try to figure out how to best leverage limited resources to make massive change across government. So some of our programs you may have heard of are FedRAMP or 18F, the Presidential Innovation Fellows. We have pockets of adoption or use of emerging tech throughout what we're doing, how we're working with agencies. But I would say overall, we're still in the very early stages and kind of storming and forming and norming what emerging tech really means to us and which emerging technologies we're really looking at that are ripe for use right now, practically speaking, within the government.
So, Dominic, with that, what are you seeing as the big hot trends in emerging tech, and what are you looking at at TTS?
So I think right now, so we have a new boss as of January, and he recently set our priorities. Anil Cherian, you may have seen him around the circuit lately. He has laid out 7 priority areas for us to focus on to improve IT modernization government-wide. And the area that most squarely aligns with what we would call emerging tech is we call it intelligent process automation. RPA with some brains to it. And so the idea is that government is super dependent on, it's highly process-oriented. We have a lot of people working. I heard a great comment before. I can't remember if it was you, Uma, who said it. Someone mentioned that we are, very process-heavy, and a lot of brains are being used for rote process instead of being applied to solving the various problems of government. So I think that is the most immediate opportunity in front of us. Other areas to improve customer experience, we're experimenting with a chatbot on the USA Gov platform. I think that's really exciting. Customer experience is the new angle, the new facet to federal IT that I'm most excited about. So there are a lot of technologies out there that can really assist us and be a force multiplier for us as we interact with the 300 plus 400 million people in this country. So we're basically trying new things. I'd say one other area I actually experimented on early on in my last role in the Office of Government-Wide Policy. We had a program that was responsible for Section 508 implementation throughout the government. And one of the things we're focused on is making sure that agencies are putting accessibility into their contracts. And when I arrived there, we had a contract of about $1 million a year. We had a group in Chicago, I think, and they were focused on manually reviewing contracts to go through them and see if they had the proper language in it. Identifying those, first they had to identify those which were IT, then they had to pour through them to see whether they had the language in there, and then they'd send a letter, literally a letter, by mail to contracting officers where they might not be in compliance. We quickly said that's ludicrous. I had a GS9 on my team who had interest in development and built a prototype engine to basically that would parse through every contract in FedBizOps, identify those that were IT, and could read through on only the machine readable. And here's another issue, to adoption is we've got a lot of bad data in the government that's tough to use. And with a higher hit rate, could read through every single contract available and identify those and send an automated email out to those who were not in compliance. And on top of that, it was a predictive model. So we're using machine learning to get better and better. So instead of responding, we could proactively go out and identify those hot spots where the language wasn't in the contracts and work with them before they even put the contract out. So that's one minor application that I think really speaks volumes about what the potential is for government use.
So, Jeremy, I know there's always some push-pull in every industry. The Center of Innovations, or Innovation Center Booz Allen, sounds pretty big. So what are the things that maybe you're pushing out to government and really saying that these are emerging tech that you really need to look at?
It's varied, but I can give you a couple sort of points on key areas that we're working with. In some respects, it's like UiPath, right? Where we're working with RPAs to help sort of, I work with one of my clients where they had, they spend 2 days doing the same task over and over again every single week, right? And we basically implemented an RPA in 2 weeks, say 500 man hours that year, and we were able to recoup that person's time, which then they started focusing that time on artificial intelligence solutions. So it was very interesting. Just freeing up that one person's time enabled us to now focus on AI, right? So it wasn't the technology so much that changed that made AI for them, but it was the freeing up of their time. So we see things around RPA as really driving into that space and helping free up resources and free up people's time to focus in on other problems. On the emerging front, I kind of break it into a couple areas. One area is data collection. Right, what are we doing to help collect the information, especially for the government clients? A lot of that comes down into real-time connections between systems, pulling in data into cloud-based systems, which then can operate on that, store it, scale storage. So I see a lot of those things happening. Setting up of like secure connections between systems, hospitals, and other entities to sort of collect data in a real-time fashion from EHRs. That's happening a lot. Then you got now you brought it in, now you want to start analyzing it, right? And that's where you start getting into the AI capabilities. Is what am I bringing to the table? Am I using regular old sort of, logical regression techniques, or am I using, deep learning, convolutional neural nets, recurrent neural nets? What's my approach for sort of now analyzing that data? I'm seeing a lot of sort of those conversations be had as organizations start bringing in the data, right? One's almost a precursor to the next. Right? And then you start getting into, okay, now that we can analyze it, how are we going to visualize it? How are we going to make business use out of that? And so you see a lot of that happening. And so the technologies that I think are driving some of those things are, it's interesting in different spots. So sometimes I see blockchain being a solution to drive that, right? Sometimes I see a lot of growth and a lot of data around genomics platforms, which is very, very interesting. That also leads itself into a whole other conversation around sort of edge computing. When you get into the idea of, genomic data can be, how are we going to process that? Are you someone capturing a full genome data or just a variant information? Massive file size differences. You're working with sometimes pathogens, sometimes you're working with human data. How are you analyzing that? Either at the location where you're collecting it and then getting that information back that needs to be processed, or how are you sort of bringing it all back in? So there's this very interesting process that I see when people start trying to answer a question around either artificial intelligence or a specific business question, you start engaging into all these different, well, what's the technology to enable the data collection, the data analysis, and that data visualization.
So, Uma, we know that RPA is one of the emerging tech that we like to talk about. But how's it different in government than in the commercial world? How is government looking at this? And then what learnings could they get from maybe what commercial is applying that same tech to?
So I'm going to answer this in two parts. The first one is how the government is using it differently than the commercial sector. I've worked with few agencies that are truly cutting edge. The leaders are cutting edge. They think beyond what even I've thought of in terms of what RPA can bring to the table. Without naming names about the agency, I was at a meeting where one of the leaders in the IT department told me, wow, this is something that I could apply for this program because I could collect all the data from all these different like borders, and then like I could analyze, and then I could find them for not meeting the compliance that they should be meeting for the government. So people do think out of the box, and that's what I'm seeing with agencies. As in commercial, not everybody is that out of the box thinkers, but there are like really good leaders in the government that are doing that. And then going back to the next question of what the government could do based on how commercial is doing, one of the things that I always complain about, and I've been in the public sector for the last 18 years, is streamlined procurement. That has been one of the biggest pain points for everybody. I mean, not only for the people who are implementing, but it's also for the government. The government leaders want to do it, but then it gets stuck in procurement. It takes forever to go through that procurement process. So just streamlining procurement would be a huge ask that I would say the government needs to fix overall across, probably in every agency. Procurement has been one of the biggest pain points. And in commercial, that's not there, because once the leaders decide, they have the funds and they just go about doing it much more faster.
It's interesting you actually said that. I was having a conversation with an agent, with some people actually yesterday, and they were saying, if we could apply RPA to the procurement process, how much better would that be? So yeah.
I think Dominic's laughing because I think that's on his bucket list, right?
Amen.
Yes.
So my wife also works at GSA, and she actually worked on a pilot and out of Region 1, or Region 2, with the UiPath and with Deloitte, where they built a prototype to do just that, to work on, they put Truman, named after President Truman, who was president when GSA was founded. We created a bot that reduced the number of hours dramatically. I think there's an important point, though, that moving from kind of these pilots, these experiments around government to full-blown adoption of these technologies is probably the real big challenge ahead of us. And so just that pilot alone, there were huge security implications, authentication, identity implications. Is a bot a person? Do we have to start managing all these bots do we need a new bot resource instead of a human resource office? We now need a bot resource office. Governing these bots, tracking what they're doing, the ethics behind them, all those considerations, I think, is a really actually exciting part. Some might think it's boring. The technologists might think that's boring. But for my solving big problems at big scale in government, that's the exciting stuff that I think TTS is going to be playing a major role in moving forward.
I mean, it's funny. The next question I had in mind is how are we extracting value from emerging tech? And I do see in my own world a lot of pilots dabbling, and it's hard, especially with that legacy environment. How do we dig in a little deeper and extract that value? So for anyone.
So I think that's where RPA actually comes into play, because it really sits well on top of legacy systems to extract the data. So in that sense, I think RPA is an enabler for legacy systems. That's just one piece where RPA plays a huge role. But besides that, it also enables AI in a way where you can see tangible results with like the ML models that you can create. And right now we have the infrastructure and the hardware to run those big ML models. So I think it drives that. That's how I see it evolving across agencies.
Yeah, I second that. I've seen that with my clients. RPA just opens them up to do more things. I would also add in, I've seen organizations, pilots are great. I love pilots because if you're doing it right, you're doing them fast, you're doing them quick, you're getting capabilities out. People can respond, and then what they do is they start opening up the conversation about what more could be done. I've seen this at a couple agencies where we started running, a pilot, with both blockchain, and then that sort of is, to connect up EHR systems, right? And then that sort of has opened the door of, well, what if we're collecting that data, what other data can we collect to marry it up, during an emergency scenario where we have to do analysis on that. So you start pulling in more data, and then next thing you know, everyone goes, well, there's a lot of data right now being pulled into that cloud environment over there. And then other groups start asking, hey, listen, can I get access to that data? I want to run my application right there and start running more analysis. And so it starts off very small, and then it snowballs. And so the value, I think, is that once you just getting moving, right? Once you start that process, I often find that if you're not trying to be too aggressive with your pilots and you're just taking small pieces, eventually, I've seen that getting the information, getting the data starts leading to more and more capabilities, and then that just drives transformation inside of an organization.
Now, do you start with that in mind of maybe celebrating that value in hopes of maybe creating that cultural change?
I definitely think you do. I mean, I've experienced that at a couple agencies where we have been successful in that approach, and then what I see is that as soon as we start, you start seeing more and more users come into the system, right? And then then next thing you know, you're being that system is then being called on to basically do more and more. And next thing you know, you're growing from we got 5 nodes deployed inside of this environment to solve specific problems. A year later, you're looking at 150. And then you had 2 use cases, and now you got 14, right? And then everyone was thinking about cloud. Now they're putting enterprise systems of record into those systems and into that. I think you celebrate that, and I think those things draw you to the next level where you can start saying, okay, now that we have all this data here, let's start changing the way that we look about the processes and the processes that we currently have in place. Because then you can have conversations around, well, we currently do it this way with pen and paper, right? Or with whatever technologies that we're using. But now we have all that data there. Well, we can, throw an analytic, throw RPA on top, throw some deep learning, algorithms on top to solve specific problems, and you just change it.
But who's your typical champion? Is that the mission owner, the CIO, your CFO, your financial officer?
I think it starts with the mission owner, and then hopefully it becomes the CIO. If you're doing it right, I think that your first priority is affecting that mission, getting that, helping that client, solving that specific problem. And if you do that, then next thing you know, everyone starts taking notice of that, and then you see, eventually, the CIO is very interested in what you're doing, right? And then you end up then you talk about that, and then they either adopt that. Or they don't. It's their call. But I think that it in my experience, though that approach has been highly successful in sort of driving transformation for these organizations.
So I'll tell you who's not the champion are the DevOps purists. And that's important because those are the folks who are on the leading edge. They're the ones defining the technology, architecture, infrastructure of the future in your agencies. If you can't pull them on board into the conversation, it's going to be an uphill battle. So I can tell you right now, 18F, it looks at RPA side-eye right now. They're like, we don't know quite what to make of this. It feels like a Band-Aid, and it doesn't solve all of the problems, right? It's going to save us time. But if the conversation ends at we are saving X number of hours, we lose. That's the starting point. That's not the end point. We need to take advantage of those hours that we've freed up and put them toward transforming, making our data open and accessible, doing the things that we have basically bought time to do. So, and especially in the environment where you're in the government, you can't recoup those savings. They don't go toward profit. Yep. So you're redirecting money. So make sure that we are very deliberate as we take on these kind of projects that are saving us time. They're not really saving us money in the government. They are reallocating, redirecting money, and make sure we are putting those into modernization.
So I have a lot of questions to ask you, but I wanted to open up the floor to everybody because I know I'm sure there are a bunch. I'll start here and then work my way back. So, or we'll. Getting a workout here.
So, is GSA doing anything through the EIS contract vehicle to make procurement of these types of services more available for the agencies?
I mean, I wouldn't limit to EIS. I think we're looking across the board. All our procurement shops are looking at emerging tech and how we buy it. Just as with the cloud, one of the big challenges is, how do you pay by the drink and not, fixed cost? What are the emerging tech? Where's the interest? We're responsive to demand in FAS, so we run like a business. I could tell you one area of emerging tech where we've been really successful is drones. Like FedSim's buying lots of drones. We haven't talked about those that kind of IoT and drone technology. I think that if the government wants it, we'll figure out how to buy it, and we're looking at how to buy it smarter, better, faster, cheaper, and certainly we want to encourage best of breed companies. We want to make sure they're competitive, but we don't want to pick winners either. So, is there any area in particular you're interested in? Yeah, I don't have the answer to you on that, on the details on what is in the art of possible on EIS. I can tell you that the technologies we're buying through EIS are leaps and bounds beyond, and using all kinds of technologies that didn't exist with old networks. Yep. But I couldn't answer in particular, but I encourage you to reach out to my buddy Bill Zielinski, who runs ITC. Or someone in his shop could answer that.
So, am I next? Yes. Oh. So, we talk about automation. Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, because I can't hear me talking through it. But automation does offer the possibility of a scaling of efficiencies, which free up people, which equate to hours, which equates to money. And I've recently been hearing from government agencies about this FITARA reporting. Is that something you're familiar with?
Oh, yeah.
So can this automation, this RPA, can those savings be reported back as savings for that agency, and give them some of that FITARA benefit and that scoring? So
I'm trying to think whether cost savings is one of the grades on FITARA. These kind of technologies can certainly help. I don't know that there's like a direct, we have saved this much money. As I mentioned, I think it's really, when you enter into the government space, you've got to think differently about the motivations and what we're not profit motivated. There's no really saving money. In fact, we are incentivized in programs to be successful so we can go to the Hill to ask for more money next year. Now, if we are effective program managers, we want to make the best use and limit and use automation to make our programs more successful. But, I don't know that as far as FITARA is concerned. I think if you are an organization that is looking to adopt and governing these types of technologies, you're probably more and actively pursuing those and open to them, you're probably an agency that would be more successful in getting a good FITARA grade, maybe, but I don't know there's a direct correlation there.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Time is money.
Yeah. Like I said, no program manager worth his weight is going to give money back. They're going to redirect it to things that they're going to maximize the effectiveness of their program. Your agency leadership would call you nuts and they'd get rid of you if you're that good that you're saving money.
I'm next. Okay. Hey, so continuing on the value extraction point that you guys were talking about, I want to get a sense of the thought that the panelists have. Say the idea is to increase automation adoption. Which one would you think is a better approach, more impactful approach? Identifying use cases that are common, challenging use cases across the agencies, like procurement, and then addressing them, or taking the land and grab approach, land and expand, where you tie up with an agency, find organic need, and fit RPA or automation to that?
I think it depends on the agency. That being said, what I've seen is that CFOs that have this vision of automating a lot of the processes that their financial analysts have to do seem to be the people that are really adopting RPA across the board, be it government, be it commercial. The CFO's office is where RPA seems to be starting. But also on the other hand, land and grab is also another methodology that seems to be working in certain agencies where mission level use cases are getting automated. Like the F-35 bomber, they had 20 years of data. They didn't know what to do with it. They used RPA, one bot, to get all the data, put some predictive analytics on top of it, analyze the data and report on it to the Hill because they had not done that for 20 years. RPA actually helped them do that reporting to the Hill. So it just depends on the agency, the leadership, the motivations behind how they want to use automation. That's how I would put it.
Yeah, so in GSA, definitely CFO's office is an early adopter and a champion for use of these technologies. I mean, from my perspective, I'm an ops guy. There's ample opportunities in travel process, training, finance, talent acquisition, all the things that make government slow inherently, I think is where I would see the best benefit from addressing first, because everyone in the agencies relies on that. The programs, if we can fix HR, make HR faster through these technologies, every program benefits from that. Every program is faster and more responsive because of that.
Hi, Jason Winder with Airstone. So, we've talked a lot about the ways that technology can be used, for the benefit of the public, right? So we're implementing these awesome automation technologies, and advantages are accruing. But we're still in the infancy of a lot of this technology, right? So I think a lot of us also stay up at night worrying about the misuse cases, right? So we're putting machine learning in charge of automation. We've got artificial intelligence starting to be used more and more to make actual automated decisions. We have technologies on the horizon like quantum computing that are going to make things even trickier and muddier. To what degree does government have the responsibility now, and it's kind of reversing this topic, right, to try to save us from ourselves to some degree, right? So there arguably is a role for government to regulate markets that don't efficiently regulate themselves, and we can see technology already starting. Reference our last election results to where things are starting to perhaps get a little out of our own control. What does government do, if anything?
So I think Dominic needs to answer this question.
Everyone's looking at Dominic.
I was trying to avoid it.
He speaks for the government, and then I have a couple of points to make after he states his view.
So, this could quickly become political, so I'm not going to really opine on the level of government's role in regulation. I think where we do regulation, we do it pretty well, and I think government does play a unique role in regulating markets and new technologies. I didn't know if Karina planted that question with you, because we were talking about this.
I can help you out with this question if you like.
But I certainly think it is our responsibility at the very least to lay out our own policies that could hopefully be adopted more broadly nationwide. We work closely with policy councils, and a lot of what the government does sets the standard for how we adopt technologies in the government. So I want to make sure that as we, certainly from our perspective, we want to make sure that ethics are always a consideration in everything we do. Security, FedRAMP's a great example of where we're setting a standard, maybe a higher standard in other industries that hopefully other industries can look to adopt. So we're always, when we set our own policies, our own standards, we do it with at least one eye looking to the rest of the country to see if they could make sense for other industries as well.
I mean, I think all organizations, Microsoft's looking at ethical AI and really driving that home, AI for all, really that this is something as a collective, as a community, we should all be looking at as we start forging our way into these technologies. Yeah,
so just to add on to what Karina just said and what Dominic just mentioned, I've been like really impressed by how the government has approached emerging tech in the last couple of years. Some of the directives that have come out of the CIO's office, the federal CIO's office, and some of the CIOs in agencies have really put some thought and processes behind how they want to adopt emerging tech. So I would say everybody is cognizant of what they need to do, and they are looking at the broader picture before they put something out there. So that's how I would answer that.
I mean, we're tackling, questions like bias and whatnot, and I think as we look at technology, we have to ask those hard questions, and it's happening. And I think when we talk about government, it's all about public trust. So it's going to have to be baked in when we're...
Yeah. One thing I'd add is, when in the early days of information technology, the government was the clear 800-pound gorilla. We ruled the roost. We set the standards for everything. We have shrunk in terms of consumer technology is much more prevalent. Apple doesn't build iPhones for the government first and foremost. We've kind of figured out how to make them work for us. And so we have to be very careful when we set these standards that we're not making added friction so we can adopt the latest technologies for ourselves. I think security is a great example. Like, we can't just go straight to the cloud like a lot of industries can because of our unique requirements, and some may say overly onerous or overly risk averse. So as we set these standards, we have to be very careful not to that we're not out of sync or creating a whole different rule set from what other industries might use.
So with that, I want to be cognizant of time. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you for the panelists for volunteering your time and joining us tonight. So I guess GSA, yes. Wow. So Dominic, here's your slide. So.
Thank you, Karina. So we are dipping our toes in the emerging tech waters in some places. The convening government-wide communities of practice. We do this in several other areas. We recently, just this week, was it last week launched the RPA community of practice, actually chaired by someone from our CFO's office who's been a real champion for this. So Ed Burrows. We have over 500 people signed up. Please participate. Please join the conversation. Bring your experiences here. These are communities that we want to tap into and listen to and understand what's going on so we can make sure we're building the right practices, collecting the best practices, seeing what's going on across government so we can design solutions to maximize our impact. So,
Jason, I hope you're going to join, right? Okay. So we have plenty of resources that we'll put in the Meetup platform as well. Any questions about Azure or the Azure platform? And then with that, next Meetup is July 31st. We've been batting around cloud accelerators. So for those who have great stories, please contact me or reach out to me. And then again, thank you for all the speakers for coming today and for all the volunteers. Thank you very much.